Hey guys, it's Mr. Francie here, and it's time to go through yet another reading vlog. And this reading vlog basically covers the second last week of February, so we have 1 week left to go, and then the month will be over, and I'll be doing the monthly wrap up, my seasonal wrap up, so seasonal books I've read, and I'll also do a separate video, seasonal books that I have DNF'd. Let's get on to this week though, because this week has been a very interesting reading week for me. Emotionally, I've kind of been all over the place with my reading, and I'll explain it all to you, so let's get right into this and discuss what I've been reading this week. Starting off with The Magician's Guild. Now, I spoke to you guys about this book in my last reading vlog, saying that I couldn't wait to get to this one. It sounded really interesting. It was a tome. It was going to be my second book that I was going to read. Let's have a look, actually. I got about 96 pages in to this book and DNF'd it. And I'm going to explain why. This book just did not interest me at all. I really thought it was going to be amazing. It sounded amazing, but the slog which, if you don't know what a slog is, basically it's what I refer to when, we're getting through all the foundational laying stuff. So the plot has begun, but it's not like things are really moving along as quickly as we would like them to, because we're being bogged down with characters and learning about them and world building and things like that. And with Mistborn, which you guys know I gush about all the time, and I'm looking forward to March 1st, a week away, woo! With Mistborn, the slog really wasn't a slog. Like, everything was really interesting for me. But this book was so incredibly boring. I'm so sorry, Trudy Canavan. I don't mean to try and drag your book through the mud, but this was just my own personal opinion. It was just really incredibly boring for me, and I just had no motivation to keep reading this, and I really feared that if I kept reading this, it might just very well ruin reading for me, so I ended up DNFing this book. But you know what? Excuse me. It didn't, it was probably the best decision that I could have made, because I ended up DNFing that book for another book that I'm going to talk to you guys about in a moment. But what I will say is the book that I replaced The Magician's Guild with was so much better than The Magician's Guild that it made any sort of residual guilt that I may have had by DNFing that one feel oh so worth it. But before we get to that book, I did finish Helen, Keller's Teacher. This is a biography book, and it's not typically the sort of genre that I would go after. It is a scholastic book, and so it is written in more of a middle grade style, but it is a biography nonetheless. It's a biography, if I can talk. It is a biography based on the life of Anne Sullivan, who was Helen Keller's teacher. And it was a really, really good book. At the time that you're seeing this, the review for this book will be up the following day. So this review is going up today. This reading vlog will go up today. The review for this book will go up tomorrow. I ended up giving this book, I have to remember, 4 stars. Yep. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. The reason it did not get 5 stars was because every time I put this book down, I really didn't feel that motivated to pick it up again. But in saying that, whenever I did pick it up, it was really intriguing and I was quite invested in it. And that's the difference between this book and my only 5-star book for this year, Mistborn. It was always a struggle for me to put Mistborn down, but whenever I did put it down, the time between having put it down and picking it back up again, I was obsessed with this book. I just kept thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Whenever I was in a situation where I had put it down, I just wanted to pick it back up all the way through until I did pick it back up again. So I was living, breathing, eating, drinking, going through life, being obsessed with that book, and I did not have that with this book. In saying that, it did receive 4 stars because it is a good book, and when I was reading it, I was very much emotionally attached to it. I don't want to give away too many spoilers here, and it is a short book, so there's not a lot I can say without giving away too many spoilers. But as I did say, it is a biography, and it follows the life of Helen Keller's teacher, Anne Sullivan, and her life is a very interesting life. She has a very tough life to begin with, and then ultimately ends up becoming Helen Keller's teacher, and that is a very intriguing read as well. The first half of this book was, it was interesting. It was very emotional in many different ways, but I didn't feel as invested in the book as I did compared to once she became Helen Keller's teacher. But that was, oh my gosh, an amazing read. I would not have read this book or known even about this world, which is a real world because it is an actual biography about what actually happened rather than the fantasies that I normally read. But it was amazing, and I would not have had this experience if it wasn't for one of my best friends who loaned this book to me. So again, a very big, massive thank you to her. It was a really good read, and it did receive 4 stars from me. If you're someone who doesn't like reading the slog of an autobiography or the slog of a standard biography, pick up a book like this. While it is a biography, it is an incredibly short read, and if you dedicate yourself to reading it, you can probably read it in 2 or 3 days max, like really, and the writing is incredibly simple to read as well. So yeah, was pretty satisfied with it overall, 4 stars, and I will talk more about it in the review of this one coming up tomorrow for you guys. Next, I want to talk about the book that replaced The Magician's Guild that I DNF'd. And again, I just want to point out that I am doing seasonal wrap-ups. So at the end of this coming week, I am going to have my monthly wrap-up, my seasonal wrap-up, as well as my seasonal DNFs. And Magician's Guild will make my seasonal DNFs video, and I'll go into more detail about why I DNF'd that one, as well as the other books that I DNF'd this season over there. So in the meantime, the book that replaced that one is this one, The Dead Girls Detective Agency. This is a book by Susie Cox, and it is, well, I wanted to call it a fantasy, and I was thinking about, like, with my wrap-up for the month, the genres of books that I've read, and I included this in the fantasy genre, but turns out it's not a fantasy. Sorry about the glare. Turns out it's excuse me. Turns out it's actually not a fantasy at all. It's actually a mystery book, which does make sense because we are solving a mystery in this book. Long story short, this is a book about the protagonist, again, I'm sorry about the glare, the protagonist here, Charlotte, who dies, and that's not actually a spoiler because it happens within the first couple of pages. She dies and becomes a ghost, and she lives in this ghostly world, and she's kind of stuck in limbo. The other ghosts that are around her basically tell her that she's not going to be able to move on from limbo until she determines who killed her and why, and then once she's done that, then she'll be able to move on to wherever it is that she's meant to go post-limbo. The book was a good read, and it was much better than The Magician's Guild. If I were to compare it to The Magician's Guild, this gets 5 stars, that gets 1 star. But looking at it as a standalone, which it's actually not, it's part of a series, which I just found out today. And I read this book and I just finished this book today. So this is a completed book. I went into say chapter 3, chapter 4, thinking this was an amazing book. I finished the book thinking, I don't really know what I'm going to rate this because there are parts of it that are done really well. The dry, sarcastic humor that the protagonist has is hilarious, and I found myself laughing so much to her internal reactions to things. Oh my gosh, just absolutely hilarious. But it's definitely YA. But it's almost YA to the maximum. Now, if you don't know what YA means young adult. It's YA to the maximum because I've never read the word like as many times as I have in this book. And by that, I mean, you know those stereotypical popular high school girls who are like, oh, and then like this happened, and like. That's this book in a nutshell. Like. Comes up a lot, and I just did not appreciate that. Also, there is a ton of actor, as in actual real life actor name dropping, character from TV shows and movies dropping, movies, TV shows dropping, and book dropping in this book. So let's just say that, I don't know, she's with her friends and I don't know, they're going through a really tough situation. She'll be like, oh, I felt like Jack from Titanic when he was about to die. And it comes up a lot of the time. Now, for me, this kind of... sorry, that was the wrong word. I was trying to say 3 words at once there. It kind of borders on copyright for me. And obviously, Susie Cox has been able to get this book out. So obviously, there weren't copyright issues with her publisher, but there were so many name drops, Leonardo DiCaprio, and also then his character Jack, mentions of Twilight and the characters there as well, and just other TV shows, bands, singers, actors, movies. It was just, for me, it was way too much. And I think that Susie Cox could have gone about this in a very different way, rather than saying, oh, I felt like Jack as he was about to die from Jack from Titanic as he was about to die. She could have said more something along the lines of, I felt like it was inevitable that this was going to occur, or something like that, where she didn't have to name drop as frequently as she did. It was just incredibly annoying. Now, I read this book alongside listening to the audio. Yes, because major update, you guys. Major update. Last week I spoke to you guys about Audible and how they don't want me as a subscriber. Well, the day after I did my reading vlog for you guys last week, Audible accepted me without me doing anything. I suddenly was a subscriber, so I mean, thank you to the gods above, because somehow that just ended up working out. With my subscription, I received a free credit, which allowed me to choose a book to listen to for free, just one book. And so I decided I might as well go with the Dead Girls Detective Agency, because with the last book, I do want to read it on my own, but I would be happy to read this one alongside listening to the audio version. And oh my gosh, the narrator is so amazing at her job, because she made it sound even more teen boppy than I imagined it to be. And she plays the narrator role really well, but it just annoyed me that little bit more. But otherwise, there are some really good things about this book. There is a dark brooding character in this book, and I don't know what it is, but I'm loving dark brooding characters. I spoke about this last week with Vampire Academy with Christian Azera, who and I'm not giving away spoilers, he's just one of the characters in the book. I absolutely love him. And there is a character in this book called Edison, who is dark and brooding as well, and I loved him as well. He was a great character also, and he played off well against the other characters that are in this book, who are more cheerful than he is. So it created a wonderful dynamic. One thing that I do want to point out to you guys, again, this is spoiler free, so I'm not going to say what happened. I'm just going to say, I'm just going to make a point, like a zoomed out of the actual plot point that I discovered. When I was listening to the audiobook, there were moments where the audiobook added in lines that weren't in this book, and then there were moments where the audiobook skipped over lines that were in this book. And it was fine, because it annoyed me a little bit, but I found a way to deal with it, and that was fine. It didn't happen too often, and it didn't go for too long. Until the very last chapter, when we reached the ultimate climax. Now, I thought we'd reached the ultimate climax 2 chapters before, but the final chapter has a massive ultimate climax right at the end of the book. And what annoyed me was the book kind of went one way, and the audiobook went a completely different way. To give you an example without discussing the book at all, let's go with... oh gosh, I don't know, really. I'll just make something up. Let's just say that the book ends by saying that the girl was fighting the bad guy, and the bad guy tried to kill her, but somehow the girl found some reserves of energy within her, and she ended up defeating the bad guy, and she walked away living post-fight. Okay, I know it's a bad example, but stay with me here. In the audiobook, it was saying, the bad guy ends up killing the main character girl, and he lives very happily ever after. So you can see how there's two completely different endings, and that really annoyed me. I was literally sitting in this chair reading and listening to the end of this book, and it was finished it about 15 minutes ago, so really recently, more recently than last week of Vampire Academy. And I was sitting here really confused, going, hang on, so did this happen the way that they portrayed in the audiobook, or did this happen the way it happened in the book? And ultimately I had to surmise that the book is the book. The book is the original. This is what Susie Cox was writing. So I have to go with the way that Susie Cox ended it and not with what the narrator was doing. I don't really have a problem with the narrator, but I would love to have a moment to ask her, and hey, if you're watching this, narrator of Dead Girls Detective Agency on Audible, if you're watching this, I would love to ask you, what version of this book were you reading where it had such an alternative ending? Because it was just opposite endings. Now, the book wraps up exactly the same, but the result of the word I just used, the big moment towards the end, I can't believe the words left me now, but the big moment that happens towards the end was completely different. And so it's kind of weird. I don't know. Like, let's say the main character is watching her friend involved in a battle, this time against the villain. And in the book, it says that the best friend is the one that survives, and those two walk off together into the sunset. The audio says the villain survived, and the villain and the main character walk off into the sunset. So ultimately, the main character walks off into the sunset, but she's either walking off into the sunset with the villain, or she's walking off into the sunset with her friend. And so, yeah, it just left me feeling extremely confused. I don't know what I'm going to rate this book, and I have not rated it yet on Goodreads. I wanted to get right to my reading vlog before I did the rating, but I'm going to say here, and this is a very loose rating that I'll correct in my monthly wrap-up if it has changed, but I'm going to say probably 2 stars. I would love to give this a 1-star review for the sake of it maybe deserves a 1-star review, but it did keep me interested enough to keep going, and I think for that sake, it should receive 2 stars and not 1. I didn't hate this book, and hate is a very strong word that I don't use often anyway. I didn't hate the book, I didn't DNF the book, but there were things that occurred throughout this book that I really just didn't like. And I'm not taking into consideration the alternate endings between the audio version and the book, because the book is what I'm judging, not the audio version. Still, I'm thinking a maximum of 2 stars at this stage, so that's kind of where that stands. So, what am I going to do between now and the end of this month? Well, I'm going to read and not listen to on audio. Or, well, maybe. I don't know. We'll see if I listen to it on audio. You'll obviously find out, this time at the end of the month. But read the book that I have so been looking forward to ever since I did my February TBR. Just really looking forward to the most. And that is The Magicians by Lev Grossman. This book has me incredibly excited. I hope I don't DNF it, but I don't think that I'm going to, because as I said last week, this book is the creation that inspired the show that was made based off this book. And I love the show. I'm still nowadays, because the new season has started up recently, I'm still nowadays watching the show that this came from, and I'm still absolutely loving this show. So I'm really looking forward to reading the original works and seeing how they came up with the show that they have based off the original book, The Magicians by Lev Grossman. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So that is my wrap up for you for what I have been reading this week. So we have so many different kind of categories of things that occurred. We have a DNF, The Magician's Guild. We have a 4-star rated biography by Scholastic, middle grade biography, Helen Keller's Teacher. We have a roughly 2-star rated mystery, YA mystery, The Dead Girls Detective Agency, and then we have the book that I'm going to read for the rest of this week, The Magicians by Lev Grossman, that I'm incredibly excited about. So what have you been reading this week? Do you have any comments, thoughts, or questions, or anything you'd like to discuss with me about any of these books that I've brought up this week? Let me know in the comments section below. Tomorrow I am going to be bringing out the review for Helen, Kellers' Teacher. And on today's Sunday, and on Tuesday, I'm going to be releasing the review for the Dead Girls Detective Agency. But until then, I'm letting you guys go with peace, blessings, and so much love. Mwah! I will see you at my monthly and seasonal wrap-ups at the end of this week and month. Until then, bye guys. Bye. Happy reading.